schönen guten Abend und ich freue mich sehr, dass Sie meiner Einladung gefolgt und heute Abend wieder mit dabei sind, wenn wir einen wunderbaren Gast haben. Er hat eine bewegte Geschichte hinter sich, zuerst mit viel Leid, das es zu verarbeiten galt. Und dabei hat ihm seine Passion geholfen, die ihn schließlich in den Dschungel von Südamerika führte. Und wie diese Lebensreise verlaufen ist und wie sie sich fortsetzt, das erfahren wir heute Abend von ihm persönlich. Harry Turner ist extra aus USA angereist, um heute bei mir zu sein. Welcome, Mr. Harry Turner.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about your life. It's a big story, I know
Yes.
that.
Where do you want to begin?
How did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the UK. My dad was in the Navy, and I bounced about from place to place, usually kind of spending a few, years in one area and then moving to another, just because my dad was going to different areas and being stationed in different places. And so a naval upbringing was basically my upbringing. I was born in Portsmouth, I moved to Scotland, and then after my dad did 12 years of service in the Navy, we then moved down to Essex, which is just east of London. And that's kind of where I started to really figure out who I was at that age. 12, 13, I started to try and, see life through my own eyes and not kind of just following the footsteps of my family. I just always had a love for nature, a love for animals, and my life just kind of started off with a military background because my dad was in the Navy. And then as I grew up and I went through school, I didn't like education system. I didn't like working a 9 to 5. I didn't like working this kind of robotic lifestyle. And I didn't really know what to do. And I had kind of lost my love for nature as I was getting older because...
Why is that?
I think that the factor of money was a big cause of that. I was always kind of thinking about what I needed to do to be successful and what I needed to do. And nature at that time and wildlife at that time didn't seem feasible for me to make money. So knowing the military growing up, at the age of 18, I joined the British Army. And that military kind of background led me to that career choice. I didn't like education. I didn't want to work a 9 to 5. I didn't want, I wanted to just do something that I felt was important. And I guess I just joined the British Army because I felt like that was my calling at the time.
Why Army and not Navy? As your dad was in the Navy?
My dad was in the Navy, and it's always one of them things where you see your parents or your family members doing something, you kind of want to do something a bit different. It's kind of interesting. I kind of see a lot of that in a lot of the world, whether it be my parents have no tattoos, so I have tattoos. My parents traveled a little bit, whereas I moved to a completely different country. And I see that with a lot of my friends that are a little bit more adventurous and a little bit more, they push the limits a little bit more. You do things the opposite of what your parents kind of do, right? And so when my dad sat down with me and he says, "Oh, if you're thinking about this, maybe you should join the Navy." And I kind of laughed and I was like, no. And then I thought about it. I said, well, I don't want to join the Navy because my dad was in the Navy, but maybe I can join the military in some way or form. And after doing a little bit of research, I spoke to my parents about this choice of potentially joining the army. And within 2 or 3 days, I went down to the recruitment center and was talking to the people in charge there. And by the time I was 18, I was already in training, and I spent the next 6 months training as a soldier before I went to my battalion, and then I went off to Afghanistan.
But isn't the Army or Navy more or less the same like 9-to-5 jobs?
It's definitely not like a 9-to-5. It's when you're needed. I never enjoyed the fact of like sitting in an office, or I like doing stuff hands-on. I like running. I like going on patrols. You know, all these different types of things. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to just work at a bank or work in an office, you know, cold calling people and just doing kind of like mundane stuff. I wanted to be able to do something where I could learn with my hands and basically try and do something where I could feel inside that I was actually somewhat making a difference. And I thought that joining the British Army would be like a heroic and life-changing experience. And it definitely was life-changing, but not for the best of reasons.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your time in Afghanistan?
Of course, yeah. I joined the military at 18 years old. I spent 6 months in training before I then went to do a 6-month tour in Afghanistan. So I turned...
6 month training,
Yeah.
and then directly to Afghanistan?
Directly. I had 2 weeks in battalion before I flew to Afghanistan. I flew to Afghanistan as a BCR, which is a battle casualty replacement. So basically, I was going to replace someone who had either died or had been injured. And so that was the first thing that I knew that I was going to do. Then when I got to Afghanistan, I had a job to do, which was basically helping the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police to teach them how to do their job. Now, I'm 18 years old.
Did you have the feeling that you were prepared enough?
I wasn't prepared. I was young, naive. And when I was there, I learned that what we were doing wasn't necessarily the correct thing.
Sounds pretty wrong.
And at the age of 18, I turned 19 in Afghanistan, but at that young age, I'm thinking to myself, am I doing this for the right reasons? Why are we here? What is the end result of us being in Afghanistan? All of the people in the past who have been injured or killed or are struggling with mental health, how do they feel about where we are in the present? And this was in 2012. And so for me, being young and naive and in Afghanistan, I realized at that moment in time that this heroic job that I wanted to do, this mission, this lifestyle was completely wrong. With that, and with the death of many people, many civilians, many military people, I returned from Afghanistan with many issues. I struggled a lot with my mental state. I think that I was too young to witness the stuff that I witnessed. I think that I was put in some pretty hard predicaments. And when I left Afghanistan, I left a little piece of my soul there.
And how did you end up in Peru? It's a long way to Peru from Afghanistan back to England.
When I returned back to the UK, I was struggling a lot with alcohol abuse. I was struggling a lot with my mental health, suicidal thoughts. I think what it was is survivor's guilt. I think that I had lived and come back, and I had seen so many people that hadn't lived and hadn't survived or had not come back. And I think that at a young age was definitely troublesome for me. I ended up Googling, work in the Amazon. I thought, I need a job. I need to get out of England because this is just miserable. I need to do something which is a little bit more exotic. And if I die there, I die there. I don't care.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you left the army by that time?
Yes. Yeah. I got medically discharged with recurrent depression. And the reason they discharged me with recurrent depression is because they didn't want to pay me to leave with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
And that's a very common thing that the British Army and most military do, is to save a little bit of money, they will just basically discharge you medically for a different reason other than PTSD.
Okay. So there's no money coming from the military now?
No. And so when I'd left the military and I Googled Peru and, the Amazon rainforest, I went there to basically end my life, I went there to go there just to say, I'm out, I was in such a bad headspace that I kind of wanted to work, but I kind of just wanted to just have an excuse to die.
Was there any kind of perspective when you arrived in Peru? So
yeah.
Could you see something for yourself, for your life, a way?
Well, when I arrived, I instantly thought about Afghanistan. The heat, the smell of the irrigation ditches, the stagnant water, the people, the different language, everything was like it reminded me of Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And in my first few days, I genuinely thought like I'd made a big mistake because I felt like I was struggling even more in this place.
Normally, as not army people, we think Peru jungle is totally different from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Because there's dry on one hand and wet on the other hand. So
it was a very weird feeling. It was the heat made me remember.
Okay,
the smells made me remember. The different language, just like walking by and listening to different people speaking in a different language that I couldn't understand. All of these factors made me think about my past.
Didn't you have a guide of some form that showed you around and gave you a place to sleep? And
when I arrived in Peru, I arrived with like a volunteer group. I arrived by myself. I went to this house that nobody was there at the beginning. It was a very weird situation. I went there and there was a bunch of police because there were missing people, and it was like this whole, you could have made a TV show on it, honestly.
Okay.
And when I went to the jungle a few days later, that's when I had like a guide and somebody who was kind of like helping me. But this wasn't touristy, this place. This place was more like volunteer work. So I went there to help a person do scientific research with reptiles and amphibians. So every night I would go out and I would look for different species, new species, and we would collect data from like pitfall traps and, all these different things that we were collecting data. And we actually just published that paper at the beginning of this year. It's taken so long of, collecting research and scientific data. And that, when I was there, was like the main reason why I was there.
And why so far out? It's about 5 hours from the nearest city?
Yeah, about 5 hours from the nearest city to the river, and then about an hour upriver on a boat. And deep in the forest. That's just where they were stationed at the time. And that was my first real experience of the Amazon. A beautiful river, beautiful forests, amazing kind of environment and sounds and smells and everything. And from going there with the idea of suicide and the idea of not wanting to return to the UK, but spending every single waking moment just, just absorbing this beauty, every day became a little bit better. And after about 2 weeks of being in the Peruvian Amazon, I had a change of heart. I I woke up one morning and I thought to myself, like, no, my life is pretty good. And then I went out on the boat and I went fishing for dinner. And as I was returning on the boat, the sun was going down and it was just this incredible, I'll always remember it. It was just this incredible time of my life where I went from feeling super depressed and super suicidal and hating everything about the world and hating my life to then thinking, you have a good life. There is beauty in this world. Why do you want to die? And so after I had this moment of realization, I went back and I had dinner with the fish that I had just caught. I went out on a night walk. The sounds were so much clearer. The smells were so much more fragrant. Like I felt alive, like I wanted to be there.
That sounds a bit like a kind of an art to see nature and life this way.
Yeah. And that day truly changed my life. Because if I had not had experienced or witnessed this feeling and this environment and this happiness, I don't know where I would be today. Mm-hmm. I genuinely believe that the jungle saved my life. And with that, I wanted to do everything that I possibly could to make sure that the jungle acknowledged how grateful I was. So I spent years in the rainforest, conserving, protecting, reforesting, reintroducing, working with local communities. And all of this was because I was just so grateful to the jungle for telling me, just like basically giving me a slap across the face and saying, wake up. The jungle made me realize this beauty.
You say that the jungle saved your life. Normally we think that the jungle is dangerous. Mm-hmm. And how did you cope with all the mosquitoes at night and all these probably dangerous things in a jungle? I mean, there are snakes and rats and mice and whatever there might be on the ground, and you just run around. How did you cope with that?
I originally went to the jungle because it was a dangerous place. I thought that if I die there, my death will look like an accident, because the jungle is perceived by everybody across the world who has not been to the jungle as a dangerous place, full of mosquitoes, full of dangerous venomous snakes, full of venomous spiders. You can drown, you can get killed by a caiman, you can get swallowed by an anaconda, like all of these different things, right? It takes one person to go to the jungle to realize that this isn't true. Uh-huh. When you are in the jungle, yes, there are a few mosquitoes. Yes, you have dengue and malaria and different diseases, but all of these are either preventable or you get it and you just deal with it. I've had dengue twice. I've had over 70 botflies. I've had leishmaniasis, parasites, giardia. I've had it all because I lived in the jungle. But you take the small piece of negativity and compare it to all of this positivity, and the death and the dark, horrible, dangerous place that everybody thinks of it is this tiny, tiny little piece compared to the whole of the forest.
Mm. And you talked about illness, and how did you manage it with medicine? I mean, we're 5 hours away from the city.
Yeah.
Normally we go to the doctor and then a few days later we go again and check it up. And how did you manage this?
The jungle is the biggest pharmacy. We go to a pharmacy around here to get antibiotics, to do all these different things. Well, the true pharmacy is the Amazon rainforest. There is so much there that can help us with many, many different things. As a foreigner, when I was there, I didn't know this at the time. But when I would speak to local people, they would say, oh, what's the matter? Like, what issue do you have? Oh, my stomach is bad. I think I drank some bad water. They would make me drink a small part of this sap from a tree called leche, which is like the milk tree. You drink it, within 2 days, you're completely fine.
Amazing.
You have, you know, a headache or any of these different things. There are different plants that you can eat. There are different, you know, just things that you can do, you know. However, I did need to use modern medicine a few times. When I had leishmaniasis, which is a skin-eating disease, that basically, for example, a mosquito must have bitten me because that's how it's transmitted, is mosquito. Then it goes into my blood. And then what happens is when you have like a small sickness or a cut or something like that, the leishmaniasis basically shows up in this area and then it starts eating your flesh.
Oh, okay.
I needed to do 21 days of heavy metal injections with that. That is a tricky one because a lot of the local native people say, oh, you can do this, but it's a little bit more deeper than just doing something surface level. This was in my blood. So I had to have 21 days of heavy metal injections. I had internal bleeding, I had liver and kidney failure, I had all of these different issues that I had to go through. That still didn't resolve it. So then I had to go back to the hospital in Lima to get burn therapy. They basically burnt the side of my leg for like 8 minutes. It was the most smelly, painful process, but it killed off
the rotten flesh. They burned it away.
It killed off the issue. So I did use modern medicine. I did have to use that. However, I used a lot of the local medicines from the local plants in the area, and that to me also grounded me a lot more in the jungle. It made me feel a lot more a part of the forest. If you go there for 2 or 3 weeks, you might not feel it, but I was there for several years. And during my time there, every time I experienced something new, every time I ate something fresh, I became more and more a part of the rainforest.
And you worked a lot with animals.
Yes.
And how about animal medicine? Normally, if we have cats and dogs, we go to a veterinarian and then he fixes it.
Yes.
And how did you do that? Did you have any kind of medicine, either local medicine or jungle medicine or modern medicine for animals?
So a lot of the animals that were rescued were given modern medicine at the beginning because they were around humans, they were around dogs and cats, they were around animals that they shouldn't be around that can then potentially give them something. So we would usually give them medication so that they could get rid of the parasites, they could start afresh, and then when they're in the jungle, the only thing that we would really do is if there was a bad cut or infection is we would sanitize it. However, they would do the correct things themselves. There were different plants in the jungle that they would chew on and they would eat, so that then if they had parasites, the stuff that they were eating would then be flushed out of them via these medications, these natural plants.
So they know it?
They know it. It's instinctual. I also learnt that by walking with these cats and walking, with these different animals, that I would see them doing this, and then later on I would, witness them doing something else, which showed me that the plant that they had just eaten, the medicine that they had just taken, was flushing that out of their system, was making them feel better. It truly was an incredible part of my life where I was able to watch these animals do natural things in the wild and not go to a zoo or not go to, different areas where you can see, wild animals. I was in a wild place with wild animals, watching them do wild things.
How do you see the connection between nature and humans, if there is any, and what can we learn in the modern world from the jungle world?
Yeah. It is scientifically proven that even if you spend 20 minutes a day just going for a walk outside, you will feel better. A lot of people these days work on their computers and work in an office space or in a studio, if you go and spend 20 minutes just in nature, your serotonin levels, your happy, happy drugs in your body
drugs, yeah.
will flourish, and you'll go to bed that night feeling more alive. If we're just constantly in a setting of concrete jungle and surrounded by false lights and computer screens and our mobile phones, we're never going to be as happy as we could be if we were in nature. And so I have seen it firsthand. I have also seen when people do come to the jungle and they put their phone away, because there's no service, there's no, you're not going to be getting emails or anything. And they just spend time sitting around a table talking to one another instead of messaging each other on social media, and going out on the river or going on a hike or spending time at night in the jungle. I have seen people change in a very short amount of time, from the depressed, from the sad, from the confused people that they were when they came, to these people who have opened up and become so much more happier in their life just because they've spent time in nature. And in the jungle, you're not just spending a little bit of time in nature, you're surrounded by it.
Mm-hmm.
You go to bed and the sounds of the jungle are so loud sometimes that it's hard to fall asleep.
Yeah, I guess so.
And so when you're surrounded by it, you're just constantly the best version of yourself.
So you didn't miss your smartphone in any way during that time?
No.
But you had a phone, I think.
During my whole time being in the jungle, I had a phone. I would, every now and again, listen to music. I would use my phone to take photos and videos. A lot of my documentary that I made was actually filmed on a phone because it was the easiest thing to keep in my pocket. If something crazy was happening, I could just bring it out. Instead of carrying around a sound system with, lenses and a body and just all of these different devices with all of these different batteries, and that's a lot of work. Whereas a lot of the time my phone was just in my pocket. I would bring it out, I would film these cats randomly, put it back in my pocket and carry on.
Mm-hmm. And where does the electricity came from?
Either a generator or solar panels. Solar panels have become a lot better these days. When I was first in the jungle in 2014, they were about, but they weren't very good, and they definitely weren't in South America. And so a lot of the time at that part of my life, that was mainly generators. They would be turned on for an hour at night. I would charge everything that I needed to charge, my lights, my camera, my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would go about the rest of my day with no electricity, no nothing. And I really enjoyed it.
It sounds very interesting to imagine that you can live without electricity. And obviously it's possible.
Yeah. The first time I'd spent a very big amount of time in the jungle, I didn't have service, my phone was on airplane mode the whole time because I didn't need it for any reason. I came out of the jungle because I was just coming into civilization to tell my family that I was okay. I wanted to have some decent food. I wanted to wash my clothes properly, Mm-hmm. I turned my phone on with Wi-Fi and my phone basically blew up because the amount of messages that came through, the amount of...
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't turned my phone on for almost, as in Wi-Fi, for almost 8 months. I think it was about 8 months was the longest stint. And it just went...
Of course.
Boom.
Yeah.
Stopped working. And for any other person, they would have been like, God, I don't have a phone now. And I was just kind of like, good. I don't need it. Because at that, I would come back into civilization to get things done that I needed to get done. Talk to family members, wash my clothes, these types of things. I would think about, who do I need to speak to? You know, how many messages am I going to have to reply to? And I would get depressed thinking about my phone turning on and getting all and receiving all these messages.
So it's better to turn it off again.
Absolutely, in my opinion.
So you worked a lot with reintegration of animals into the jungle. And why is that so important?
A lot of these animals that get taken from the jungle are because of people. Humans will go in and they will cut down a tree, selective logging, or they will cut down a swath of forest, or they will hunt different animals so that they can eat them. A lot of the time what people will do is when they are working these jobs, cutting down trees, you know, cutting down forest, hunting, all these types of things, they don't get paid a lot of money. They get paid very, very, very little. For example, to cut down a 400-year-old iron tree, which is worth thousands and thousands of dollars, one person might get paid about $70.
Okay.
And that can take a lot of time. That can take a lot of time away from their family. This can be weeks and weeks away from their family. How are you meant to, with one tree, cut it down, spend all that time, go home, and then provide for your family? You can't. There's no way you can do that. So when people are in the jungle, if they see a monkey with a baby on its back, they will shoot the mum so that they can eat the monkey. They will take the baby and they will sell the baby to make a little bit of extra profit. Because what they can sell that monkey for is about half the price of what that tree is going to give them.
So, okay.
So when people are in the rainforest trying to survive and they're cutting down trees, which is paying them very, very little, they take what they can to sell on the black market. The 2 ocelots that I rescued were going towards the black market. Now, where they were going after that, I do not know. I know that there is a huge want and need for them in Asia, places like China. They want to buy ocelots so that they can make medicines out of them, sell their pelts, all these different things. There's also the exotic pet trade, where if they do go to these places, they'll usually rip out their claws, grind down their teeth, put them in chains, and then they sell them to people as a pet, even though they're wild. So when these people are in the forest destroying it, they will take what they can so they can sell them. So for me, what it comes down to is putting these animals back into the rainforest. Did
you buy the animals on the market?
I did not. Buying the animals is like throwing gasoline on a fire. If a Peruvian or an Ecuadorian person sees a foreigner, a white person usually, buying an animal, they will all just go, oh, next time I see an animal, I'll just bring it out and sell it to them.
Okay.
That to me
sounds logical.
Yeah, that to me is the last thing that I want to do, is then put future animals in threat.
And how did you get these animals?
A lot of the time was very, very hard. So the first ocelot took me about 7 hours of communicating, a lot of the time arguing with these people about why it was important for this animal to go back into the forest, how I could help this animal go back into the forest. They would then be talking to me and arguing to me, well, you know, I need money, and I've had this animal for 5 days and I brought it all the way down river and I've given it milk and I've given it these types of things. And I'm like, well, you shouldn't have taken it. You shouldn't have done these things because... But at the same time, I understand their argument. They don't have any money.
They need money.
If my family needed something and I had to provide and I had nothing to provide for them, I would do anything, or the majority of what I could, to provide for my family. Yeah. So when I see these people who are not respected by their government, they have very bad education system. They have many family members because they aren't taught about sex education, contraception. They aren't taught any of these things. A lot of these kids, 13, 14-year-old girls, have babies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you've got all of these, things that you need to provide for, you will do anything. So I understood their argument. And so a lot of the times I would talk to them, I would educate them, I would buy them a beer, I would talk to them and say, look, I know that you've given and provided for this animal. Here's a drink, here's a bottle of Coca-Cola, or, here's a few beers, or can I buy you dinner?
Isn't that a payment as well?
I'm not giving them money.
It's not the money, it's the gesture.
That's right. I'm giving them this very small, because they want to sell this animal for $100.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm giving them a beer which costs $3. And I'm saying, look, I know that you put some time into this. I'm sorry that you thought that this was going to work out for you. Here's a beer, or here is some food.
How did you find these people? On black markets, meeting points, or whatever?
There was a small community in the jungle. And from my research, this community was the most, how do I say this? This community did a lot of illegal stuff. They're good people, but it was just the location of where they were. Lots of drugs would go through this community. Lots of animals would go through this community. Lots of illegal activity would go through this community. And I was friends.
Excuse me, what is this community? You talked about the research team before, but it's not the research team, this community.
This is a local community. A lot of the people that were from the Andes, from the mountains, moved away because they wanted to get away from the danger of the cartel and the drug lords. They moved from the mountains of the Andes into the jungle to make their own community.
Oh, okay, I see.
This community of people are not indigenous, native, local people. However, they are from the same country. And with this area that they had gone to, this was a hotspot for transitional points for drugs and animals and all sorts of things, trees, whatever you can think of. This area was definitely doing something to support that. Now, I was friends with a lot of the community members. I was living on the same river that all of this activity was happening on. I would go there and I would buy my food. I would hang out with some local people every now and again. I would play football with them. And so when they saw my enthusiasm, when they saw my love for nature, and when they saw that I was there for a good reason, and I started to teach them the health of the forest is your health. If you have negative and dark and horrible forest around you, you are going to get sick. If you kill every single snake and you kill every single cat because they are eating your chickens, you are going to have an infestation of rodents, rats, mice, whatever. And without control, these rodents, these mice, these rats are going to bring diseases.
Yeah, of course.
So you need to think about the health of the forest that you are surrounded by, so that then you can live a healthy life. So you
have to bring back the ocelots, for example.
Right. So you need to, if you want to help this forest, let me know when there is an animal that needs help. And I will come down. Now, sometimes I would be in the jungle doing my own thing. I would hear a boat. I would go down to the river. They'd say, Harry, there's an animal in the community that needs your help. Vamos, let's go. We'd go on the boat. I'd talk to them. I'd come up with 2 pigs or monkeys, or I came back with an agouti once and a macaw, just because they were trying to sell them, because they had shot them, or they had shot their mums, or they cut down a tree and they'd found the babies, or...
Okay.
And a lot of the time, I would speak to the local communities and I would bring back these animals and I would put them in a situation where they were able to go off and be free by themselves. A lot of the time they would be free, they would be healthy because I would give them the things that they needed. I would give them food, I would give them water, I would give them areas and spaces that they needed to survive. And they would go off, and then 4 or 5 days later they would come back, and then just to check in, and then they'd go off again, and then later on they wouldn't come back. Whether they had been eaten, whether they had been found a new territory, whether they had just gone off and found a different, macaws, huge birds, beautiful, incredible birds, very, very intelligent. They would go and find a clay lick with the group of macaws, and they would integrate themselves with that family.
But that's the reason why you're doing
I wanted
this.
to put them back where they needed to be because they're just so important. And so I spent a lot of my time learning about these animals and watching them and teaching myself and speaking to local people just so that I could do my part to give back to this wonderful and beautiful part of the rainforest.
And we see it here. There was a film made about your life in the jungle, and there's an ocelot to be seen on this cover. So tell us, how did that come about? Amazon Studios produced it, and we basically see these 2 ocelots that you work with and that you reintegrate into the jungle. So how did it came?
I started filming because what I was doing was different. I wanted to show my family, I wanted to show my friends that what I was a part of was so unlike what everybody else at home was doing. Working a 9 to 5 job, living for the weekend, going out and drinking, going to festivals and doing a bunch of drugs and doing all these things. What I was doing was, I was 23 years old when, I turned 23 when Khan, the first ocelot, came about. I was filming because this is incredible. When, a few years ago, I never ever would have thought, being super down and depressed, that I would be walking barefoot in the forest with this incredible cat. Never in my life. So I wanted to document this. I wanted to remember these memories. I wanted to keep them forever. However, what I was doing with this cat was putting it back into the rainforest. The rainforest is a dangerous place. Don't get me wrong. If you're an animal and you're living out in the rainforest, you're surrounded by animals that want to kill you. This is the circle of life.
Yeah, definitely.
So I wanted to remember them, and I didn't know when they were going to leave. I didn't know if they were going to die. I didn't know what their path was. So I started filming Khan, the first cat, just because I wanted to keep these memories. I don't want to ruin the documentary for anybody who hasn't seen it, but for the people that have seen it, they know that what happens with Khan is a horrible situation to be in. Whether it was just my situation, his situation, the situation of the world when it comes down to illegal trafficking and poaching. And after Khan, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I left Peru. I went to Australia. I was handling some of the world's most venomous snakes. I didn't care. I was struggling so much. But deep down inside, I knew that I had to go back to the jungle. I don't know what it was. And I've always done this. I'm a person that believes that if you have a gut feeling, go with it. I went back to the jungle. I met a guy called Trevor Frost, who is a National Geographic photographer. He heard about my story from a mutual friend. He asked to see some of the footage that I had of Khan. I showed him, and after 20 minutes of him going through one of my hard drives, he basically was like, you have something incredibly special here. If you want to work with me, you have an opportunity right now to make a small documentary, a short documentary on Khan, the ocelot. So I thought about it. I said, I'll get back to you on that because, you know, all of these memories are my memories. What am I going to...
It's a kind of personal thing.
It's very personal. What am I going to do with this? Are they going to make it a story that I don't want or I don't believe in? Are they going to... I know what documentaries...
Did you have any control about what is the final film? About the story, about what is shown on the film, about yourself?
Well, with Trevor, I basically was like, look, I will make a short documentary on Khan. And we were planning on doing that. And then 16 days later, Keanu, the second ocelot, came into my life and he said, look, we were going to make a short documentary on all of yours. We were going to, you know, do all this. Let's make this a full documentary. Let's film Keanu. Let's film the whole process. Let's go from it. So he gave me camera equipment. He came down, you know, every 6 to 8 weeks and he filmed me. And then with that, we didn't know where it was going to go. We thought that we could make something. But then when we started showing it to people and we started showing it, you know, what the footage that we had, people were just blown away. How are you getting this footage of these people?
It's amazing footage,
How
by the way.
are you able to film this ocelot killing this caiman? And how are you able to do this? And they say, well, he's living it. We're not making a TV show which is like completely manipulated. This is what we're filming and this is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So the film was very organic. However, when it comes down to the documentary, there are things that people want to see and there are things that people don't want to see. Mm-hmm. So when it came down to the editing process, that's when things were a little bit more complicated for me. I filmed everything organic. If I was crying, I was crying. If I was happy, I was happy. If I was filming Keanu doing his thing, I was filming him doing his thing. Then when it came down to editing, they changed a few things. They manipulated a few things. They made it seem, you know, as if certain things weren't what they actually were. But at the end of the day, I wanted Khan and Keanu to be remembered. I wanted this story to be important because I want Did you know what an ocelot was before watching the documentary?
Honestly, not.
Exactly. I wanted people to know what ocelots were, how important they are, the dangers that surround the jungle and everything that lives under the canopy of the jungle, or even above the canopy. The jungle is such an important place that I let the small manipulations of the film go because I wanted the power of the story to change people's minds.
And I think that is successful because it changed my view of the jungle, of your life. I think it's a wonderful balance so that you on the one side and the ocelots are on the other side and even more people involved in this process. And so I think it's a very personal documentary. Did
you cry?
Yes, one time. I don't want to spoil anything, but yes.
Yes.
Because I have cats for all my life and I know exactly what this was about.
But that's the thing. If you are not touched and if you are not emotional about a documentary or a film, you're never going to remember it. The reason why my documentary is so powerful is because it's so raw and authentic.
That's true.
Wanted people to feel my depression. Because this isn't just a story about putting animals back into the forest. This is a story about mental health.
A story about emotion between a human and an animal.
Yeah.
That's what I would see it.
Yeah. But there's emotion, there's mental health, there's love, there's resilience. There is so much more than just an animal being put in the rainforest. And that's why I think when I saw the original film, before it was out in theaters, before it went out onto Amazon Prime, I saw, because I know it, because I filmed it, I saw some differences, but I put them aside because I said, is my film going to change the world? Is my film going to change a person's view? And it has.
I would agree to that, definitely.
I have, after my documentary came out, had thousands of people messaging me saying, thank you for showing your emotions. Thank you for... I had one woman, she messaged me and she says, watching your documentary made me understand the depression that my husband has gone through because of his service. Her husband was also, he was a Marine. He went to Afghanistan and Iraq. He struggled severely with depression, but she could never understand what his triggers were, what his problems were. She said, because I watched your documentary, I was able to have a deeper conversation with him, and now I understand. Because a lot of guys don't open up about their emotions. They don't want to look weak, or they don't want to show sadness. They're like, no, you know, I'm going to drink some alcohol and I'm going to, you know, get on with it.
As you said, that was your first reaction too.
Exactly. So for some people to see my documentary and to see how other people have dealt with post-traumatic stress disorder, that was eye-opening for them. To see my documentary and to see the issues that the world is having with deforestation and with the illegal trade and all of these things, that is why I was okay with the changes that Amazon Prime made to my story.
And when the film was out for a couple of weeks, how did it change your personal life? I mean, you said thousands of messages, but that was not all, I guess.
It was tricky. I got noticed in the streets. People would take photos with me. I got messages. And to be honest, I know that when there is something online about somebody, you're going to get two sides of it. You're going to get the love and you're going to get the hate. I was very, very fortunate only to have 3 messages where people were hateful and angry. And
why is that?
Jealousy, I guess.
Oh, jealousy, okay.
Because I don't know who these people are. They could be still living with their parents, financially depressed, eating fast food and fat, you know. I don't know. But they saw my life and they were like, oh, you know, you're a... And they said some horrible stuff. But at the end of the day, I read it, put my phone down.
Yeah, and that's it.
And said, I don't know why. There are some people out there that just want to cause problems for people that are trying to do good. But there are always going to be them people. And I thought about it and I thought, they're probably just jealous because I'm living a life that they will never live because they don't have the balls or they don't have the guts to just take that leap of faith. I've done a lot of things in my life where I've pushed limits. I've taken that leap of faith. I've put myself in very, very high-risk situations. But you don't get reward without risk.
Of course.
You need to take risk to get reward. And for me, I risked not seeing my family again to put these animals back in the rainforest.
So now you have a new project. You're not in Peru at the moment. You came from America and you have a new project. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Absolutely. So when I left Peru, I left at the very, very start of the pandemic. So I left at the end of 2019. I went home for Christmas. I traveled a little bit, and then the pandemic basically shut everything down. So it was a little bit of a pain because we were trying to put this film out into the world, but we couldn't do specific things and we couldn't, you know.
It was kind of complicated.
It was very complicated. However, it gave me a lot of time to realize I am not done making change. And how am I going to make more change? Well, I'm having a documentary about my life coming out into the world. I didn't know the success that it was going to be. However, I knew that my story was going to be out there. So me and my wife, Lexi, sat down and had a talk about what can we do to continue doing good in the world. We can, foster dogs, and we can, do good things for conservation by volunteering or doing these things. However, if we make a non-profit organization, we can be the change that we want to make. And so we started Emerald Arch, my non-profit, in 2022. I wanted to focus on Amazonian rainforest because that's where my passion lies. That's where I met my wife, Lexi. That's where I have the biggest drive. I can't protect the whole world.
Of course.
I can't do everything. However, I can focus on one thing, and with that, I can make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
So with our nonprofit, it's a US nonprofit. We're in the middle of starting our Ecuadorian nonprofit as well so that we can work side by side. And now we are trying to preserve land in Ecuador.
Why Ecuador? Why not Peru?
I found that Peru was an incredible country. However, it was politically challenged. It was extremely tricky when it came to specific issues regarding mining and people being killed because of conservation and
Mm-hmm.
and
So
I
more
also
or less dangerous place?
it's not necessarily more dangerous. However, there was just many complications, and a lot of the areas that I were looking at were very protected, but issues were happening inside them, a lot of corruption.
Okay.
When I, during the pandemic, went to Ecuador, I immediately fell in love with the place. It's such a small country with so much diversity. The people are incredible. The Amazon is absolutely mind-blowing.
How do I have to think about this? You just jump on an airplane, you fly to Ecuador, out of the door, and now here I am. Did you have a guide in Ecuador?
I had
People who
no
showed you
guide,
around, or?
but I have many friends there that are working with reptile and amphibian conservation. So when I flew there, I actually went there to just go help out my friends. We found a new species of lizard when I was there. I found a new species of frog. We were doing this really cool scientific research, but during the pandemic, it was very tricky to get permits to go to these places because everything was shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So I spoke to another friend of mine who owned a lodge in Coyabeno Reserve. They are run purely on tourism. And because Ecuador was shut down at this time,
Of course.
they had no tourism. So they all left the jungle to go to their farms so that they could provide for their families. And I went into the jungle to look after the lodge. I would clean and sweep and do my night walks and look for animals and film and photograph things. And I lived there alone for 3 months with hardly any food. All I did was I went fishing. I would just eat the pumpkins and everything that was growing around. And when I was there, like, the jungle to me was just this. I had spent a lot of time in the Peruvian Amazon, but the Ecuadorian Amazon was a different ball game. It was incredible. There is no, if I can't take you there, I can't explain how beautiful, pristine, just vast this Ecuadorian Amazon is. It's incredible.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, so seeing this place, seeing this country, seeing these people and loving all of it, I decided that I wanted to help Ecuador because they also have a lot of issues, but the issues that they have in the Coyabeno area and Sucumbíos region are not just detrimental to the rainforest, but to everybody around. The issue, unlike Peru, that I was dealing with, and in Peru it was a lot of stuff with illegal logging and, you know, poaching and all these different things, Ecuador has an issue with oil companies. A lot of the oil that is used around the world is because of the Amazon rainforest. The Amazon rainforest is the biggest area in the world for oil and petroleum.
So drilling.
They drill down 5-6 kilometers. They take up as much as they can. But once you take all of these things, you divide it. So the oil and the petroleum and all of these different things gets put in one area, and then the crude oil, which is with the leaves and all of these, it's a smelly substance, very toxic, very sticky, horrible. Where does that go? Well, what they do is oil companies, they buy the land for very cheap. They dump the crude oil in these areas, like these swimming pool areas. But the rainforest rains all the time. So when it floods, all of this oil goes everywhere. It kills off species. It goes into drinking water that people use. It destroys the rainforest. The smell is outrageous. And so I saw this firsthand, and I said, I love the Amazon. How can I protect it? Well, if I buy these areas, and if I, with the nonprofit, work in these areas to buy these areas with donations and funding and grants and all these different things, we can protect this crucial place from being completely destroyed by oil companies.
But don't the companies just go to another place and do the same? You cannot buy
I can't buy it all, but these oil companies have way more money than these local people do. And the area that I'm looking at is right next to the Cuyabeno Reserve. So if I can buy these areas via Emerald Arch that aren't going to kill off everything in these reserves, then they can go somewhere else. They can figure out their thing. I'm going to fight and fight and fight until they can do things as sustainably as possible. But the issue with Cuyabeno is it is an area of water. If they buy land next to the Cuyabeno Reserve, they dump crude oil there and it goes into the reserve, it'll kill so many animals and so many species. It'll actually make many, many species extinct in that area because it's such a diverse area for specific species that aren't found anywhere else in the world.
I guess so, yeah. But let's talk about money. If you buy land, even if it's cheap, you need the money for it.
Yep.
How do you fund all these projects?
I believe that with my story and with my passion and enthusiasm, I will be able to reach the correct people when the time comes. I've been talking to many, many different people. I've been doing, things like this. I want to come on and I want to talk to people so that more people hear the story and more people can then reach out to me and say, hey, I watched your film, it was really good, here's $50, for example. But who knows? There could be somebody that's listening to this that is extremely wealthy and they want to make a difference. And with their money and with their donation, they can make a huge difference. There is so many opportunities for people to do good. However, if somebody is going to volunteer their time, that's fantastic. But if somebody has a lot of money and they are going to donate an hour's worth of money that they are going to make from, whatever, that money that they will make in an hour will do so much more good than an hour's worth of volunteering. And so it comes to what can you contribute when it comes down to conservation of this earth? How are you going to make a difference? Me personally, I've bought a plot of land in Ecuador. It's an incredible plot of land, but now I don't have any more money. I am doing the things that I can to prove that I'm going to be in this area a long time. But there could be more people out in the world who want to do good. They don't know how to, but they can look at my story, my background, my enthusiasm, my persistence to save the rainforest and to help this world. and they will be able to then donate, and they will be able to then come down to the jungle to experience what they're actually making a change in.
Do you still profit from this film if somebody
No.
buys it, or is it just a one-time payment?
It was a one-off thing. They bought the film from us. You know, we were paid. That was it. I don't get any royalties. I don't get anything from it. However, the benefits that I do get from this documentary is that people see my life, they believe in my story, and they spread the word. I speak to different people on podcasts, on shows, in interviews. People reach out to me via my nonprofit or via my social medias, and they want to know how that they can make a difference. So I don't make money from the film anymore. However, I make more, and I make better things. I make connections, and I make these different friendships that I never would have made if it wasn't for the documentary. And via these friendships, I'm going to be able to make a lot of difference.
So, you met your wife during your project. Can you tell us a little bit about that? You're married now?
Yeah.
Is she working with you and sharing the same thoughts? And
yes. So me and Lexi met at the very, very end of the Keanu project. I actually met her in the Peruvian Amazon, just briefly. We share a love for nature and wildlife and conservation and just sustainability and just being able to do good things. We foster dogs at home all the time because we want to be able to give these dogs a life, which is not euthanasia. We want, you know, we always try our best. And so when we started Emerald Arch, we wanted to do good. Emerald Arch at the minute is not at a point where it can pay us. It's not at a point where it can kind of do anything to sustain our lives. However, we are bringing people in. We are making, you know, a little bit of profit from, a little bit of money to put towards Amazon conservation. And with that, like, we both share the same goals, and we both care deeply about not just saving the rainforest, but using the local people to actually help their land. You know, this is their land. We're just trying to help them by not having to sell it to the oil companies. A lot of the lands that we want to buy, and this is something that me and my wife see very clearly on, and we're on the exact same page, is that when we buy the lands in the future, if there's already farms on them, we are either going to reforest them, or we're going to keep the farms there so that the local people that had originally owned it can still work on their farms, and they can still use their farms sustainably so that they can provide for their family, so that they don't have to sell it and then go and cut down more rainforest.
Okay.
Because if I'm to buy land from somebody, and at the moment, Amazonian land is selling for about $1,000 per hectare. So it's very cheap. It's cheap. And if I'm to buy 60 hectares from a person, I give them $60,000, they're then going to go and buy another piece of land to then cut it down to then grow more fruit because they want a farm. How else are they going to sustain their family, you know? What we want to do is we want to buy these areas which are going to be bought up by oil companies. I can guarantee that in the next 5 years, these oil companies will buy these places, they will destroy them, and they will fill the water systems that these people are using for drinking and for farming, for all these things, full of oil contaminants. We want to help these people by buying the lands there, protecting them, preserving them, and also letting the people that once owned them use their forests and use their fruiting lands so that they can continue to, one, make money, but two, to be able to still provide for their families. The area of land that Emerald Arch wants to buy is going to be roughly around 3,000 acres. It's a huge, huge plot of land. However, it's going to be an area where we can, one, protect it, and via our nonprofit, we want to bring veterans who are dealing with PTSD.
Who owns it now? Because you said the people who formerly owns the place and who owns it now? The state? Government?
Usually individuals. So the areas that we want to buy are owned roughly by 25 families. They are all sectioned off, you know, each one has an area of 60 to 120 hectares. They are, you know, doing small bits on their land. They're either cutting down trees, they're making, you know, farms, they're doing all these different bits and pieces. We are making connections with all of these people constantly. Every time I go to Ecuador, I speak to the families. I tell them, you know, this is what we're going to want to do. If this is something that you want to be a part of, you know, this is going to be us, you know. This is our friendship as it is now. It's not going to change when we buy the lands because we want to do this. And they're happy with that. I can't just go to a place and I can't just say, here's some money, I'm buying your land, that's it, get out. That doesn't do any good. In order to make change, you need to form relationships. You need to form commitments to these people. Because as a white foreigner, I go into these places and they just look at me like, who the hell are you? Especially with all my tattoos. Like they
Why do you have so many tattoos?
It's just a form of art, I guess. I struggle deeply with depression. I'm a lot better now. I still struggle with depression. Depression is a part of me. It's never, ever going to go away. But a lot of my tattoos were made during a time of my life when I was struggling a lot and I didn't know what to do. And the pain combined with, I don't know, it's a tricky, like, instead of cutting myself, I would go and get tattooed because the pain is equal, but it was something pretty and not disgusting.
Okay.
So a lot of my tattoos were in a time of hate and anger, and it was kind of a therapy, I guess. But I also just love the art and love the meaning behind some of them. I don't have meaning for everyone.
But meaning, we see it in the film. Do you have something on your back?
Yes, from the top of my head all the way down my spine, yeah.
Tell us a bit about this.
I was walking in the forest once with Keanu, and I remember standing above him and looking down and taking a photograph because he was so camouflaged in all of these leaves. It was just this incredible experience just to watch this ocelot just so camouflaged. And as I was looking at the photo, I was thinking, wow, his like pattern is just so bold, so vivid. Now, ocelots are kind of like me and you. Their patterns are like our fingerprints. They're different. Every single ocelot has basically a different fingerprint in pattern. And I was just looking at his pattern and looking at his thing, and I was thinking, I want to have a tattoo that I can remember Keanu by, but I don't know what it's going to be because I already have Khan on my throat. I got this after I had come back from Peru after the issue with Khan, and I'd always said, like, oh, I'm not going to get anything on my throat because it's a bit in your face, it's a bit bold, you know. But at that moment in time, I just said, whatever. Like, he meant so much to me. I don't care what people think. I don't care what job is going to refuse me in the future. I don't care about any of these things. So I got him and his face and Wicked Game tattooed on my throat. And I was thinking, how can I get a tattoo of Keanu which isn't his face? Because their faces are very, very similar.
Of course.
I didn't want two of the same tattoos.
And nobody would see it, that these are two different cats.
And so when I took that photo, I was like, that is incredible. Like, it's such a beautiful, powerful, bold statement. where could I get that? And I was looking at it, and I'd say it's from the back of his head all the way down to his tail.
Now you have it.
And I thought, why don't I just have a part of that on me, you know? His exact pattern tattooed on the back of my head and spine.
I think it's a very nice idea.
Yeah.
So, beside all the animals, you want to bring veterans to your project, to the jungle, to the Amazon jungle.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why people?
Well, as we talked about, putting people into nature will definitely make them see the best parts of themselves. When veterans who are dealing with depression are struggling, I want them to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because there is always going to be light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't matter how depressed you are, there is always that glimmer of hope. When you're in nature, doing everything that you possibly can to avoid the outside world and to avoid all these different things, you're going to be put in a position where you can just relax, you can just absorb the jungle, and you can see some hope.
What do you think, how long do people need to find out what you have found out?
So personally, it took me 2 weeks. However, when I do the veterans therapy program, I want to make it like a month to 6 weeks. I want to do 4 to 6 weeks of bringing them to the jungle. And it's not just coming to the jungle to have a vacation. It's not that. It's going to be self-reflection. It's going to be help. With this huge swaths of land that we want to buy, the 3,000 acres, they're also going to be doing park ranger work. They're going to be patrolling. We're going to be camping out. We're going to be doing all these types of things. Because the biggest issue that I find with people when they leave the military is that they have no purpose when they leave. They leave with depression, they don't have a purpose, they struggle, they get depressed, they drink their sorrows away, they either kill themselves, kill their relationships, or go on to just be a hateful person. So bringing people who are dealing with depression to the jungle to give them a job, to be able to be a park ranger, to be able to be in beauty whilst doing something which is good for conservation, and also giving them a purpose, is going to not just change...
It's a meaning. Right?
Exactly. It's not just going to change their happiness. It's going to change their mindset. It changed mine.
And what do you think will happen when they go back? They are 6 weeks in your place and they have all these wonderful things around them. And then they go back to the US, to Great Britain, to wherever they come from. It changed you to go into the jungle and to work with the jungle. What do you think will happen to these veterans when they go back to the normal world?
It's a good question. I've thought about it a lot. And I think that what it will do is it will show them during their short stay in the jungle that it's not hopeless, that they do have something to live for. Now, everybody deals with depression differently. Everybody deals with trauma differently. So I can't say for sure that, you know, the one person is going to come out and be completely fine and the other is going to come out and be completely different, because I don't know. I hope and I want them to come out of the jungle and want to continue in conservational work, or I want them to come out and be excited about the future. Because when I left the jungle, I went back to the UK, I had high hopes, I was happy, I spoke to my family respectfully for the first time in who knows how long. I had this drive in me again that I had lost, but the jungle had given it back to me. You know, I had something. For me, being back in the UK was tricky. I didn't really want to be there. So when I started to feel depressed again, I said, what do I have here? I have family, but my family's always going to be there. I have friends, but my friends will always be there if they're true friends. The jungle needs me. So I went back. However, these veterans who are going to be coming out, they might have a better purpose to be back home. They just want to have a better mindset. And so when they go back, I hope that their mindset has changed enough for them to feel productive enough to want to work on the issues that was causing them pain in the past.
Or maybe you will find some co-workers in the jungle.
Or maybe they'll say,
they stay in the jungle.
Can we stay here? And I'll say, hey, if that also makes you happy, let's figure it out.
So actually you work in the US. Why the US and what are you doing there?
My wife was born and raised in Washington State. She has a large family, loves her family immensely, and when it came down to us being married, there was some conversations which were, where are we going to stay? What are we going to do? Where are we going to live? And basically, she won the argument of us living in Washington State. I didn't necessarily want to live in the US, but I love her so much, and I love our relationship and our commitment to nature. And Washington is honestly an incredibly beautiful part of the country, and it's a part of the world which is very open and free to thoughts and to changes in the world, and it's a very healthy state. So I moved there because of my marriage, and now I'm working, when I'm not working in South America, in construction and trying to do as much as I can as possible in the sustainability of construction. I feel like, so when we work on a house now, we work in a way where I do a survey before on the reptiles and amphibians and mammals in the area, during and then after, to see if there's been any changes in the wildlife in the area before we start work and after we finished work. Because a lot of people in construction will build these houses, throw their stuff on the floor, you know, whatever, and it causes an issue with the surrounding nature. And so I work in construction, but I work in like a sustainability kind of part of it, as well as, you know, the workforce.
And you build houses in nature, not in the city? Normally you have a city and there's not so much nature
renovate
around.
Houses.
Oh, okay.
So usually we will change roofs. We're primarily are working in a roofing industry. However, we also, when we are changing the roofs, we will work on the interior of the house as well. And it's, when you're working on the roof, you're working on the area around it as well. Whatever is going to come off of the roof is going to come into these areas. And Washington is a very wet state. It rains a lot of the time, very humid. It has its own temperate rainforest. It's an incredible place. But you have to be very careful about the environment. We can't, as humans, just keep building and building and building and doing it the same way that we are, because it's not sustainable. Like, we need to do things which don't impact our nature as much as we once did. We got to think about the small things, the salamanders that breathe through their skin. Like, what chemicals are we putting on houses and insulation and all these different things which are causing harm on the local environment around us? So I'm working in Washington State at the minute doing this sustainable construction and spending about 6 months there. And I'm spending about 6 months in Ecuador because we just bought the first plot of land where we're reforesting and we're doing camera trapping projects.
Is your wife joining you when you go to South America?
Yes, in August we're hoping to head back, and Lexi will be joining to help with the data collection and to see, you know, more of the land and yeah, it's going to be exciting.
Sounds very easy. We just go away for 6 months. Okay, then we come back and work for 6 months.
Yeah, it's
normally that is not so easy because you have a job and you cannot just go away for half a year.
I'm very fortunate that the job that I have also knows that I work in conservation with my own nonprofit. So they're very flexible when it comes down to what hours and days I can work. And with Lexi's job as well, she works in like a escrow, like a kind of part of the real estate, and she works in like a small women-run company, and they are also extremely good with her leaving to do, you know, more good for the world.
That's luck.
Yeah, it's tricky. You know, we have a mortgage to pay. We have dogs. We have, you know, all these different.
Do you take the dogs with you?
Oh, I wish I could, but
you cannot.
One of them was rescued from Peru. Lexi brought her back because she was in a very bad state, and she's a little bit of a troubled dog. And I think that bringing her back to the rainforest would cause her some severe trauma.
Okay.
But also the travel is just not, it's just not good for...
Who's caring for the dogs while you are away?
Yeah, so we have... The good thing about living in Washington and the good thing about Lexi's family is that she has a huge network of family and friends. Mm-hmm. And so when we do go away, they go for sleepovers with her mum or family members or friends, and we do our best to ensure that while we're away they are in the best hands possible.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of tricky for 6 months.
Yeah, it's not usually 6 months in one chunk. It's 6 months of the year, so okay. I'll go for 2 months, come back.
Okay.
Months. But
yeah, that makes it a bit
it's still not easy. It's very tricky. But like I said, there isn't reward without risk, and I have to, if I'm trying to do all these good things, and if we are trying to do all these good things, we have to definitely risk specific things. You know, our relationship is a tricky one, because if I'm not there all the time, that can be hard, but we make it work because we know that we're doing good things. Our dogs, you know, we're doing good things for them. We've rescued all of our dogs. You know, that's what we live and stand by, is rescuing animals that need help. And we can't be there for them all the time. I can't be there because I have to be in Ecuador a lot of the time. And so we have to make compromises a lot of the time when it comes down to the way that we live, because if it was easy to change the world, I think a lot more people would do it.
Yeah, of course.
But it's not.
So how do you see this contrast between nature work on one hand, and on the other hand, you need the internet for commercial things, you have to promote your work?
Yeah.
Is that a big contrast inside you, or can you just separate it and say, okay, this is what I do here, this is what I do there?
It was very tricky. I didn't want anything to do with websites and with meetings and with all these different things. However, I saw after my documentary that there was a lot of positivity that came with the internet and with social media and with all these different things. And so it's not something that I enjoy, but I know that it's something that will help me do the things that I need to do. There is a lot that we need to do to protect this world, and a lot of it can't just be done solo with no Wi-Fi, no nothing. However, as much as I need the internet, when I'm in the jungle, it's something that I'm trying to eliminate from the aspect of people coming, veterans and all these different things, because I know how much the jungle would be able to help them when they are in the jungle, not temporarily with...
So no Starlink and things like this?
As much as that would be great for communication in an emergency, I believe that when it comes down to the healing powers of the jungle, eliminating the outside world is one of the most important things. in 2014, we didn't have Starlink. We didn't have these types of, you know, satellite phones where you could just kind of text. We had a radio, and if I needed anything, I would have to radio through and hope somebody was on the other end. However, during that time, I got to meet some of my closest friends. I got to meet some of the most incredible people that were doing scientific research. I got to learn so much more about nature because I wasn't focused on the outside world. I was focused on me. I was focused on my mental health. I was focused on my progress. A lot of people these days will go out and they will take a photo, not for themselves, for the world to see. And that is one of the biggest downfalls of society, is that we're not doing things for us anymore. We're doing things for clout. And as much as some of these famous people and, you know, internet superstars are making money, I don't see a lot of that going back into the world. I see a lot of that going back into the industry of
social media industry.
Who's doing what and how can we outdo them? The world has become a competition when it should not be. And internet has a huge role to play in that.
Of course it has. And it always has good sides and bad sides.
Absolutely.
So, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I hope that you will find more people on the internet to bring these people or their ideas or their money back into the jungle to help your projects.
Absolutely. I am very positive about it. I really hope that the next few years go in the direction that we want. I hope that we can raise sufficient funds so that we can buy the lands so that the oil companies don't destroy not just the forest there, but the surrounding people and the surrounding forests. I know that my passion is the biggest drive. I know that when people hear my story and they hear my enthusiasm about the rainforest and how it changed my life, I know that that's going to spark some interest. I am a person that has struggled with mental health, and I am a person that still struggles. However, the jungle made me see clearly in the time that I needed it the most. I'm not a religious person. However, if I was, I would have said that in that moment, that was when whatever God showed me the light. I believe that we all are connected to nature, whether it be the smallest of mushroom on the ground to the largest of trees to all of the animals. I believe that they all are as important as us, and if not more important. We as humans are doing everything that we can so that we can live our lives, but we're not looking at the bigger picture. If we want to make change, we need to open up our eyes, we need to look outside the box, and we need to do the things that we can. So I'm hopeful that with conversations with people like yourself, with interviews, with podcasts, with my book that's going to be coming out in the next few years, with my nonprofit, and with bringing people to the rainforest, there is going to be an impact made bigger than just my documentary.
So you are writing a book, and you said you write it for years, or will come out in a few years. What it is about?
So with the documentary, I can only put a certain amount of my life into a few minutes. You know, that an hour and 40 minutes is not a sufficient amount of time for me to tell the deepest parts about my life. With Khan and Keanu, I was able to show some of the stuff in the documentary, but I wasn't really able to capture a lot of that on video because it was so quick and so intense. And when you're in a forest surrounded by mosquitoes and you're sweating and your battery dies and you've got all of these things going on, you can't capture some of the most incredible moments. However, my memories were able to capture that, and I want to put them down into my book. My book isn't just about Khan and Keanu. It's about my struggle with depression. It's about my upbringing. It's about all of these small things which made my life now. I believe that a lot of the things that I have done have put me in the place now where I am. If I had not gone to Afghanistan, I would never have gone to the jungle. If I'd never have gone to the jungle, I never would have met Khan and Keanu or my wife. If I had never met them, I never would have made a documentary. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing in Ecuador. And so everything that I've done in my life has happened for a reason. And I feel like the best way to express that is via a book. I also know that with books, I will be able to tour the world doing speaking engagements. And ultimately, that's what I want to do as a job. I don't want to just protect the rainforest. I want to be an advocate for conservation, for mental health, for the environment and the impact that it has. I feel like I am a good speaker. I enjoy speaking. I want to do this in the future. And a book is a stepping stone as well to put me on that platform so that I'm able to voice the problems and the issues in the world. And it's taken me a long time. As I said to you, I didn't enjoy the education system, and I definitely don't enjoy reading or writing as much as I do enjoy going out and finding snakes and walking with ocelots. However, my story is important. My story is unique. I feel like a book will be able to capture that in a different light. I will be able to tell people stories that I can only really express deeply on paper. And yeah, I'm just super excited for my story, my real, true story, to be out there in the future. I'm working with an amazing agent at the moment who is helping me with editing. I'm hoping in the next few months I can get a publisher on board, and I'm hoping that with that we can then start the serious editing process, whether that be changing it from English to Spanish or German or whatever languages, so that then I'm going to be able to spread my message and my story a little bit more to the world.
Do you think it's a kind of therapy for you, maybe for others as well, or will be?
Yes. However, a lot of the things that I have done in my life, I have swept under the rug. So when I'm writing about them, it can be very emotional. It can be very upsetting talking about some of the things that I've done in my life, whether they be in Afghanistan, whether that be in Peru, whether that be when I was younger. I'm bringing up topics which are trauma, which are triggering, and I'm writing them down, and I'm spending hours and hours and hours thinking and thinking and thinking about these specific things that sometimes I can go for days and days and days afterwards, where I'm just in a very bad headspace because I've had to write down these horrible things that I've witnessed in my past. However, that being said, I do believe that they are therapeutic in a way, because I'm bringing these things up again. I'm rethinking them now that I have a better headspace, now that I have a better life, because I'm a little bit older. I've been able to compose myself a little bit better. I have a great support system with my wife and my family. So now that I'm able to think about these past traumas with a better headspace, they are to some degree therapeutic. That being said, they're not necessarily the easiest of things to write about or think about, and so they can be really, really difficult for me to put them on paper.
Do you think it's difficult to read for people who have experienced the same things like you in Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan?
I believe that my story and the way that I'm writing it is a very personal one. Many people will be able to see similarities in war or trauma or many different things. But my book isn't just about the negativity. It's about what comes next. It's about the future. It's about resilience. I am here right now doing these important things for conservation and working towards a better future, not just for the health of the forest and the earth, but a better future for me and my mental health. And so I hope that when people do read these, they see that the trauma and the things that I've had to go through have put me in a place where I can be a voice for the voiceless. I can do things for the future, and I hope that my book can not... I hope my book doesn't trigger people, even though it might. However, I believe that if it does trigger them, they will be able to then see the positivity that came out of them in that environment, and them...
Maybe for one and another is that
Exactly.
the kind of solution to their own
For me,
problems.
it's tricky because I don't want to upset people. But I know that to make change and for change to happen, you need to have an emotional response. So
Of course.
if you don't cry at the film, that's fine. If you do cry at the film, that's also fine. But either way, you're going to look at my film and my documentary, and you're going to see now where I am, how I have got here, and how nature has helped. And I hope that with these things, they see the positivity at the end of it and not just the negativity in the moment.
I think positivity is always better.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's something that we struggle to see in this world because we're always surrounded by negativity.
Are you still filming all this for another documentary, possibly?
I am filming, but just like Wildcat, I started just filming because I wanted to remember memories. But what I'm doing with this is I'm filming, but not to make a documentary. If a documentary is made because of this, then that's great. But I'm not forcing it because I don't know what the end goal is of a documentary right now.
And for Amazon, it's not interesting to see the progress, what came out of this?
I know that a lot of people want to see what happened next with me and after the documentary. And I think that if I was to make another documentary, that would kind of be the idea of what happened next with my nonprofit, with, you know, buying land in Ecuador and doing all these different things. However, it's not a goal that I'm putting all of my energy into. I'm filming as I go because I believe that it's important to just record, because who knows, I could make another documentary which changes people's lives. But this is not my goal at the moment. My primary focus is making sure that Emerald Arch goes in the way it needs to go within we have a 5-year and 10-year goal, and I'm hoping that Emerald Arch is going to meet them goals in the next 5 to 10 years, and we can really, really make some differences.
So I hope that many people after this show as well look for your works, your projects, and progress in anything, what you do, and that it will be successful.
Thank you so much.
It was a great, great story. Thank you very much for that.
It's been a pleasure coming on. It's been a pleasure talking about some of the parts of my life that wasn't necessarily mentioned in the documentary. You know, I'm 32 years old now. I can't put everything in an hour and 40-minute documentary. And so it's a pleasure and an honor to come on, to be able to talk about my story and to be able to share a little bit more with the world about my passion and my drive. So thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ja, meine Damen und Herren, das war eine ganz bewegende Geschichte. Und natürlich hoffen wir, dass sie Ihnen gefallen hat und dass Sie auch das ein bisschen weiterverfolgen, was es auf der einen Seite mit Wildcat begann und auf der anderen Seite, ja, was man heute alles über Harry Turner noch so finden kann und seine Projekte. Und vielleicht ist ja auch der ein oder andere von Ihnen dabei, die Projekte zu unterstützen. Ich bedanke mich sehr herzlich fürs Zuschauen und ich freue mich, wenn Sie wieder dabei sind. Immer am ersten Montag eines Monats. Und bis dahin sage ich, bis demnächst in diesem Theater.